Yes. Okay. Ahasuerus, who is also known as Xerxes. So if you remember a recent movie called Gods and Kings, and it was about Xerxes, kind of portrayed him as a maniac. Okay, I just want you to know he's the guy we're talking about. He was such a powerful king, he ruled all of Persia. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the head of gold, in other words, the hugest and most powerful kingdom on earth, this is Ahasuerus' kingdom. He ruled 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. He ruled the known world. There were literally hundreds of thousands, probably really truly millions of people under his reign. This is a powerful man. Okay, we understand from Esther 1:3, he was quite a young man because he'd only been a king for 3 years. He was probably at most in his early 30s, possibly even in his late 20s. This is a young king by any account whatsoever. Okay, he was accustomed to being obeyed immediately, or you were killed. Those were the choices you had. You obeyed or you died. I just want you to know that. He could be a kind man, as we're going to see, but he did still understand the necessity of authority and maintaining authority. Okay, he was also wise because he gathered wise counselors around him. Someone who thinks they know everything and they're so arrogant and they don't need anyone's help. Those are the kind of people who are dangerous and frequently will get into trouble. This guy had a whole group of wise counselors with him. He actually was not an idiot, all right? We find all of that in the first 5 verses of Esther, but we're not going to read it. He also threw this massive banquet after 3 years. Now, let me do a little history for you. Nebuchadnezzar went and took the Jewish persons, every single one of them that were princes or of noble blood that seemed to be worthwhile, and carried them off to Babylon, and he killed everyone else off. And when he took them, he took everything out of the temple of Solomon and destroyed the temple. So all the golden vessels, all the bowls and dishes he took out of the temple. And when he holds this feast, he shows off his wealth. That would be the wealth of the temple to all these visiting people. He has a feast for 6 months. At the end of that, for an entire week, anyone in his kingdom can come to a feast, rich and poor alike, and they're served. So he couldn't have been that big of a jerk if he's really going to let everybody in his kingdom, no matter who you are, show up in the palace, come to this feast, dine and wine. He actually was not that much of a jerk, which sometimes you'll hear him portrayed that way, but if you'll read it, you find out, not really. Okay, during this feast, he calls for Vashti, the queen, to come and appear. She's a really beautiful woman. Now, she's over at her house having a feast for women. In other words, she's having her own personal party while the boys are over there doing their thing. And Ahasuerus calls for her. Hello, I'm busy. Are you kidding me, dude? And she refuses. I'm thinking this is a really bad plan. Just saying. But here's my question for you. Have you ever been so busy doing your own thing that you didn't obey? That you didn't hearken to the voice that was calling for you? That you refused the command of the one in authority over you? Because if you have, you understand what happened to her. Now, she paid really dearly for this. In Esther 1:13, we will begin. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment. Now listen to all these wise men. And the next unto him was Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and which sat first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to law? Because she hath not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen hath not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing or the language thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. This woman was deposed that very moment from being queen. And she lost her estate. She was a very wealthy woman in her own right because he had given her so much. And she never saw the face of the king again. In some writings that you read, they contend that he killed her. I can't find it anywhere. I don't really see that, to be truthful. But I will tell you that all of her power was gone. All of her influence was gone. She was just sent probably to, who knows where, outer Mongolia. I mean, she was just never going to have power or influence again. We may underestimate the consequences of what we perceive of as a simple little sin. We need to be really careful because things may have far-reaching results we couldn't have imagined at the time. Okay. The wise men who surrounded Ahasuerus, and I love how they are told by name. So this is all historically accurate and actually able to be followed in history. We know this really happened. Okay, they knew the potential ramifications of Vashti's rebellion against Ahasuerus. If the queen can disrespect the king in that manner, every woman in her house is going to be like, dude, I don't know who you think you are, but you're not going to be telling me what to do, okay? Have any of us ever heard this language? So lest we think it is our right as a woman to stand up for ourselves, and I can bring home the bacon and I can fry it up in a pan, that wonderful commercial that shows women as super powerful. How foolish we are to come against the plan of God and think it's going to do something good for us. Okay. Ahasuerus knew that not only did this bring sin into his own house, it was going to bring it to his kingdom. He just couldn't allow it. So he nipped it in the bud, and she was gone. This guy had all kinds of concubines. If Solomon had 1,000, I don't even want to know how many this boy had, really. And it doesn't tell us, and I'm thankful because I don't want to hear it. But, there's no doubt the boy didn't need to be lonely at night, okay? I'm just telling you the truth. But after a while, he missed having a queen. Because just because you can run around with however many dozen women doesn't mean that the needs of your heart are being met by having one that is a treasure, that is important, that matters in your life. So he shows up. He doesn't have a queen. Now I want you to know you're going to pay attention and find out how long he went without a queen. But history tells us the reason why is he spent about 3 years going and conquering Greece. So now he really is the ruler of all the known world. I want you to know that. In Esther 2, verse 5. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. Saul was also a son of Kish, just so you know. So he is also related to King Saul, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So it was his great-great-great-grandfather that was carried away by Nebuchadnezzar, and now, what do you know? He's still living here. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So here's a man, a Jewish man. He has what in Scripture is called his niece, but we would understand it more as cousin, but it doesn't matter, a near relative. And when her mother and her father died, she had no one to take care of her. And by the way it sounds, she was obviously a little girl when it happened, because you know what? She's only maybe 14, 15, 16 now. She's not an old person. I mean, Jewish maidens were usually married at 14, 15, so we know she's not old. But Mordecai's already been in her position of parent for quite some time. So he has the care of this girl. And you notice that Hadassah has another name, Esther. Remember, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not those guys' names. Shimei, Mishael. Those are their given names in another culture. And Esther has a culturally appropriate name. That's where the name Esther comes from. Esther 2:10. Esther had not showed, God bless you, her people, nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. In this ingathering of virgins, for this was the plan of the wise men. Let's send out and find beautiful virgins all over the world and bring them in. And, you know, every night you can have a new one. And when you finally find one you like, you can keep her and she can be the queen. That was the plan. And Esther was among these women. She was fair and she was beautiful. She got brought into the palace and placed in the harem. Now, the harem had two parts. Part one, they're getting you ready. It takes a year. Part two, after you've been to the king, you go to the house of the concubines. If he never calls for you again, this is where you spend your life. Now, if you've seen The King and I, and you understand all those women living there in that harem together, and some of them were really treasured and some of them were not, you can understand. But life wasn't really all that hard. And you had great food and you had decent company. You could always probably find a friend amongst those women, even from your own culture, because they weren't all from one culture. It was okay, but you never saw any men. If you never bore any children, life could be pretty lonely. And if you were 15 years old and you lived to be 75, that was a whole lot of life spent in the house of the concubines. That was reality, just so you know. All right, now, Mordecai told Esther, don't tell anyone that you're a Jew. And she obeyed him. Esther 2:8. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, which such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given to her, out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house, to know how Esther did, and what should become of her. Now, Esther had a pleasing personality. You know that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of young women brought in. Hegai was a man who had dealt with women probably his entire life. That was his job. He knew what to do. He knew how to train them, how to prepare them to please the king. And when he saw Esther, wow, he was so impressed. Gave her 7 maids of her own and put her in the best possible quarters and rushed her through to the forefront of getting ready. Something about this girl was impressive. I don't care how beautiful she was. If she was a little, he'd be like, okay, you can go back to the line. There really had to have been something lovely in Esther that he saw. And he moved her right to the front. Now, Mordecai kept checking in on her. I have to tell you, this is really unusual. Once you're there, you don't see men. But you know that from the very beginning of Esther, Mordecai worked in the courts of the king. Somewhere he had a job there. And since he was one of the sons of the princes of Israel, this would be logical. So he had some kind of access, at least through Hegai, to get word to Esther. Find out, is she doing okay? How is it? This is the thing I want you to know. He really loved Esther. He was very concerned for her. And I have a suspicion, if it worked out, he reminded her about God and the necessity of what her inner life should look like when he sent word back and forth to her. because that's the way he raised her. Why wouldn't he continue to send that kind of message to her? All right, Esther 2:12. Now when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of women, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house, because she's not going to be back, remember. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Vashti was called at the beginning of the 3rd year. Now he's almost at the end of his 7th. This man hasn't had a queen for 4 years. Okay. As with every young virgin that was ever brought to the king, Esther's preparation took a year. And she listened well to the instructions of Hegai. She's some little Jewish girl. She doesn't know what to do for a king. She doesn't know court protocol. What does she know? She doesn't know a thing. And instead of going in there like, well, I'm going to, no. She goes in there with a submissive, obedient spirit. Everything Hegai tells her, that's what she does. This girl is getting ready. She could be queen. Now, don't worry, all these other hundreds of girls, because in a year's time, I can't even, the king probably at least 300 or more if he's a regular red-blooded male. He's seen a lot of women, and more than seen them, I might add. But, he's had a lot of women go in front of his face. What is going to set apart this one little girl? No kidding. She paid attention. She was earnest in obeying Hegai and listening to what he told her so that she could be prepared to meet the king, to give the best presentations of herself that she could. This is what I want you to know. If you've ever known anyone who's got a lot of people in their world, they're going to accidentally call somebody the wrong name sooner or later, right? I do it with my 100 kids at school. They'll be like, Miss Newby, don't you know my name? I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay, I do know your name, but another name came out of my mouth. If he was impressed enough to know your name and call for you by name, you went back. Otherwise, you're done. Off to the house of concubines, and we're not going to see you anymore. So Esther was really a wise young woman. She listened to Hegai. And when she went to Ahasuerus' house, to the palace, the only thing she took with her was what Hegai told her to take. I'm thinking not so much. Okay. All right. And so here we are, Esther 2:17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. That's only one verse. I'm imagining this might have taken a little time. But all these other people he had seen didn't really impress him much. This girl, wow. She obtained grace and favor in his sight. And oftentimes in a coronation, there are big guys or fancy guys or chamberlains. They crown you. He put the royal throne on her head himself. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. I'm thinking all the leftover virgins got to go home. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm thinking so. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. When you're 4 and 5, you listen, generally, to what people over you tell you because you understand that they're looking out for your best interests. Esther is a young woman, and now she's queen, but she still has an obedient heart. She's still listening to Mordecai. Vital piece of information for all of us. This woman had a submissive heart, and you know what? It was to her credit, including in the eyes of Ahasuerus. Okay, he threw this feast for her that went across every single province he ruled. He sent out gifts in honor of her to all the people. Chances are good those gifts were food and wine out of his own storehouse, but nonetheless, he honored her amazingly. And she had won out over hundreds and hundreds of women, and what she had won was the king's heart. Okay, this was really a great victory for her as a woman. I don't know if you've ever liked a guy and there's this really cute, pretty girl that likes him too, and you're thinking, I don't even stand a chance, and yet he chooses you and you feel like the queen. And I have to tell you, I have a good friend whose name I won't mention because she's probably going to see this video, but there was a guy in her life and she was crazy about this guy, and there were all kinds of girls who were wild about him, and she ended up married to him. They've been married like almost 40 years, and she still says, I got the prize. And so we understand what that's like, but Esther's personality was not, I'm going to win out over all you other wenches. Really, she had this quiet, obedient heart that won him out. And it was that sweetness and that inner beauty of hers that really impressed the king. The question for us is, do we have a sweetness or an element in us that draws people or that makes other people recognize something in us? Because I think we've all known people that are really pretty, but they're just nobody to know. You get up against them, you're like, whoa! Okay, you look really great from a distance, but just let's keep the distance. Some people aren't very pretty, but you get to know them, they're absolutely lovely. Esther was blessed. She had them both, but she wasn't foolish in terms of being conceited or, yeah, look at me. She really had a submissive heart. Chapter 3. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. First commandment, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Jews didn't bow. They might bow to a king, but they weren't going to bow to someone else. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Notice we don't get an answer. Some things don't deserve an answer. Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath, and he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were out throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Oh, it's not going to be enough to just kill this one guy. Let's just kill the lot of them. Okay? Enter the enemy, Haman. Oh, he hated Mordecai's guts. It was being obedient to God. This is why Mordecai didn't bow down. But Haman, in his pride, he deserved to be worshipped and adored and reverenced. And so he despised Mordecai's religion and Mordecai's God. He would not just destroy Mordecai, he would destroy every single Jew in the known world. Verse 8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. These guys aren't doing you any good. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that take charge of this business, to bring it to the king's treasuries. I'm going to pay this out of my own pocket just to get rid of these boys. I'll be glad to pay it. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written, according to all that Haman had commanded, unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. Oh, this boy meant serious business. And the letters were sent by posts into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Everything they own, if you kill them, it belongs to you. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, good day's work. But the city Shushan was perplexed. Haman used his influence over the king to get him to sign a decree that every Jew in the world could be killed. I mean, babies, 3 and 4-year-olds, every woman, pregnant or not, and certainly every man of the Jews. And whoever kills them gets their property. Now, none of us can forget, even today, very truthfully, lots of big money in New York and Hollywood is in the hands of Jewish people. God has prospered his own chosen people throughout history. You can believe there were extremely wealthy Jews in the world. And you kill them, you get their stuff. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and a bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate. Stop there, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it to her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. Mordecai has the big picture. He is grieving mightily before God. Esther hears that Mordecai's in sackcloth. She sends him fresh garments. She sends him oil. She wants him to lay off his sackcloth. She doesn't have the whole picture. Frequently, little kids don't. Young people don't. That's why they need someone older and wiser. Praise God, she had Mordecai in her life. Verse 5. Then called Esther for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai, to know what it was and why it was. So Hatak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go unto the king to make supplication to him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. This is a trustworthy guy. Esther learned about Haman's hatred through Mordecai, but also by the hand of a trusted servant, Hatak. She had people, we'll call it, on her team that were very trustworthy and were very devoted to her. Okay, because Hatak could have blown the whistle right off the bat. He was obviously a very trustworthy person and cared for the queen. She was truly distressed when she got this news. Okay. Perhaps Mordecai had really sheltered her. I would say that would be extremely normal in the Jewish culture, believe it or not, even all the way until this day. They are very protective of their young women and of their virtue, which they should be. Would to God that we were more protective. But probably Mordecai had sheltered her for much of her life. And so she really wasn't as aware of how serious all of this was as she might have been. Or maybe because she's the wife of the king, she's going to be spared. Verse 10. Again Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther. Definitely a man with some authority in his voice. Think not within thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Oh, Mordecai did not take this lightly. I mean, he's standing there in front of a chamberlain of the king with commandment and authority in his voice. You better let this girl know how serious this really is. She may have achieved this position inside of the palace by God's plan in order to save the entire nation alive. You better let Esther know. She can't afford to think, well, I'll just keep quiet and I'll be okay. Are you kidding? You're going to die, and so are all of your people, all of your father's people. No, you might die when you go in front of the king, but you will die in the 12th month of Adar if you don't speak up. So make up your mind. Which day are you going to die? And if you're willing to go in front of the king now, who knows? Maybe you're going to save everyone. Come on, Esther. Think, girl, and get some guts. I mean, really and truly, this is her, basically her father saying, you are not thinking straight. You better start thinking straight, girl. Okay. She was really in a very desperate position. I mean, there is nothing good about this. Verse 15. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Esther is a really wise woman. Her answer to Mordecai is, call every Jew in Shushan to fasting and prayer, and then I'll go to the king. You know, she didn't just go busting into the king. She knew God better be with her when she walked in that door. And she was wise enough to get everyone in the whole city to fast and pray on her behalf. Chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel. So she's going to put on her queen's garment to do this one. And stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. So here she is, way out here, and here's the king. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that it was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. You know, Esther had been preparing for 3 whole days. She fasted and prayed. Much of her personal preparation was spiritual. Okay. However, she had to have her household get everything going to be prepared for the king coming to her. She had a lot of work to do. Sometimes when you're in trouble and things look really grim, you get paralyzed. It's like, oh man, that's the time to get moving, girl. You got stuff to do. So there has to be the balance of prayer and fasting and quiet and preparation in your spirit. But there are things to get done out here. You have to get everything done. When the enemy comes against you like a flood, your response has to be get up and move. Don't just sit there paralyzed in fear. And so Esther got bathed and dressed, but her most important preparation was her spirit. And the king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet I prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king had said. She choked. She heard from the king himself he's going to be giving her half the kingdom. That is figurative language. Baby, just ask me whatever you want. I'm going to give it to you. Okay? But she still couldn't get it out. You know, we know she's a submissive, sweet girl. I'm imagining she's feeling a little shy and a lot fearful. She finally got him to the house, but she can't quite spit it out of her mouth. I think the words just got stuck really deep down in her throat. So she's like, okay, come to dinner tomorrow. Oh my word, let's start over again. Verse 9. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, like his wife doesn't know this, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. This guy, he's such a piece of work. How prideful. I mean, he's telling about his glory and his position and his accomplishments. And I'm sorry, but his wife is sitting there. I think she was the one who had all these kids. I could be confused, but come on, are you joking? You know, no wonder Haman is so distressed and angered that Mordecai will not bow to him. He thinks everybody ought to be bound to him. Wow, okay. He really thought he was worthy of honor, and certainly from some lowly servant, a Jew. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. At that very moment when Esther told the king what she wanted her life saved, and she wanted the lives of her people preserved. That was a very dire moment for Haman. He really knew he was pretty much doomed. Verse 7. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. Woo! He's hot. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So they hanged Haman on the gallows. Oh, the king was so mad when he left that room. And then he comes back and he finds Haman pushing the queen for mercy so vigorously on her own couch that from the king's vantage point, it literally looked like Haman's trying to force the woman. Whoa, that was a whole lot more than the king was ready to deal with. I mean, he was already not okay. And then you're going to do this with my wife right in front of my very eyes? The end. I mean, Haman was a dead man. That was it, that very day. For those of you who already know the story, you might think I've been leaving out some really important things. But the great news is we are going to look at Mordecai's victory next week. So we're sticking with Esther. All right. On that day did King Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, to Esther, the queen. Remember, Haman is a very wealthy man. He's second only to the king. Every single thing he owned became Esther's that day. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. So now she inherits all this house and all this land and all this wealth, and she's going to put Mordecai over it. You know the extent to which she trusts Mordecai with her life and everything she owns. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet. I'm talking laying on the ground, holding on to him. And besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. I mean, this law is still in place. Every baby, child, man, and woman of the Jews, they're all going to get killed here in a couple of months. This hasn't gone away. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and this thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how shall I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? I just can't stand it. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, for the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. Don't hate me. We're stopping there. We'll be back. I promise. We'll do Mordecai in 2 weeks because we'll finish Esther out. But let me tell you the things already that we find. To win a victory, sometimes we might be in a really bad spot. Okay? I mean, these guys are in a foreign country. They don't really have their own place. They don't have their own culture. There's nothing great about where they live already. Okay? But we need to submit and we need to learn wherever we might be. Now, oh, someday when life is better and things are better, and I'll submit then. Well, you're not going to win any victories like that because rebellion doesn't really ever do anybody any good, and it certainly isn't going to give you a victorious position before God. So no matter where you are, no matter how lousy it is, and no matter how uncomfortable it is, and how really not conducive to a great spiritual life, you are responsible for your own spiritual life, and you are responsible for your own attitude. Esther definitely shows that. Number 2, hard one for some of us. We might have to learn how to keep quiet. Remember 1 Thessalonians 4:11? And that ye study to be quiet, to do your own business, and to work with your own hands as we commanded you. That you study to be quiet. Esther was told by Mordecai, don't say a word, and she didn't. Some things are far better kept to ourselves. That's not easy. We all know it. Man, somebody tells us something like, we just want to tell the whole wide world. Sometimes it's better to be quiet. Number 3, we really need to listen with respect to our elders. Our culture really doesn't do this much anymore. That's why I think we're in so much trouble. Esther listened to Mordecai, and she obeyed him. She could have done the whole teenager, you're not my dad. I mean, you're not even my real dad. Who do you think you are? And I'm the queen. Whatever. This girl, she had a submissive heart. She was willing to be obedient and to show respect to Mordecai. And it changed the course of history, literally. Okay. We don't know what we're losing when we have a rebellious heart. We really need to allow other people to help us. We really can't do everything ourselves. When Esther hit that point of trouble, she didn't go, okay, well, I'm the queen and I'm a pretty smart girl. I'll think of something. No way. She said, wow, people better start fasting and praying for me. I need help. If I'm going to do the right thing, if I'm going to find favor with the king, if anything's going to go right, I need you guys. How often do we go, well, I don't really want to bother anyone. Somehow or another, it'll be all right. And we do it to our own selves. That is not wisdom, ladies. We need to learn to ask for help, to really admit, I'm not that big, I'm not that strong, I might not even be that smart sometimes. I need help. Esther's victory, even the victory of standing in front of Ahasuerus and finding him welcoming, was because she allowed someone else to participate in her struggle and help her out. We surely need to let someone help us. And number 5, we might really risk our very lives in doing the right thing. Although I'm not sure that too many of us will. But I'm pretty sure some of the kids in the younger generation, they very well might. But you know what? Far better to give our lives for the right than to live a life that is wrong. And it is the very thing that brought Esther to be who she is, because she was willing to risk her life. In order to win the victory, there may be days we have to be willing to risk a lot before we're really actually going to see victory come. And we may face a fearsome enemy. There is no doubt that might happen. They may be more powerful than us, more influential than us. They might be a lot more things. Certainly they might be richer than us. But we have to remember who our God is, and that when we stand for what He calls us to stand for, sooner or later, maybe not with the rapidity that Esther saw it, but sooner or later, our enemy will fall. We just need to keep depending upon God to take care of the situation. Okay, so we'll do part 2 next week. I warned you I probably wasn't going to get through because there's so much to it. All right, let's pray. God, I thank you so much that you were mighty on Esther's behalf. And I thank you for the power that we see in a submitted life. Our culture doesn't influence us or encourage us to be submitted. It does, in fact, encourage us to be rebellious. I ask you, God, in the name of Jesus, that you would forgive us for both saying and at times believing a lie. And I ask that you would give us courage to believe the truth, that in submitting our lives to you and those in authority over us, that is where we will find the greatest of victories. I thank you for Esther's life and her example, and I thank you for the reality of what this young woman went through in order to save her people and your people alive. And I pray that you would help us to have that same sweet and submissive spirit to you, God, in order that we might see others' lives saved. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.